You're standing in your kitchen with your phone pressed to your ear, nodding even though the other person can't see you. They've been talking for 20 minutes straight, unloading everything: work drama, family tension, the same problem they've had for months. You glance at the clock, feel your chest tighten, and realize you're going to carry this conversation with you for the rest of the day. You don't like admitting how often you let people emotionally unload on you even when you're already exhausted. Here's the interruption you can use today, exactly as written: I care about you, but I don't have the capacity to hold all of this right now. Say it once, calmly, without explaining further. In the next 10 minutes, the weight in your chest eases. The conversation either shortens or changes shape. You notice your shoulders drop, and for the first time, you don't feel responsible for fixing what was just handed to you. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. This won't rush you, but it will keep you from spiraling. The pain here isn't that people talk to you. It's that they offload onto you. They vent, process, and release, and you're left holding the emotional residue long after the conversation ends. It shows up in your body as tension, in your mind as rumination, and in your relationships as quiet resentment. This is costing you energy, focus, and peace. Over time, it turns care into burnout. What's actually happening in these moments is subtle. You're not choosing to be someone's emotional dumping ground, you're defaulting into it. You listen past your limits because you don't want to seem cold. You absorb more than you should because you don't want to interrupt. And afterward, you tell yourself it's just the price of being supportive. But support without boundaries isn't kindness. It's slow self-erasure. By the end of this lesson, you won't stop caring about people. Instead, you'll learn how to limit emotional dumping without guilt, how to protect your energy without cutting people off, and how to leave conversations feeling lighter instead of drained. The goal isn't total control, it's earlier intervention, so things don't pile up inside you. If learning how to protect your energy while staying connected matters to you, these lessons are built to keep paying off in real life. Subscribe for more lessons like this. First, you'll learn how to interrupt emotional dumping the moment it starts, without sounding harsh or defensive. Next, you'll see how to correct the dynamic when someone keeps venting even after you've given space. Then, you'll practice staying grounded when guilt or pressure pushes you to overlisten. Finally, you'll watch how these tools come together in a real situation that doesn't end perfectly, but does feel lighter. There's a moment later where someone you care about keeps pushing past your boundary, and everything in you wants to give in just this once. When that moment shows up, you'll know how to respond without abandoning yourself or the relationship. You're walking out of work, phone in hand, when a familiar name lights up the screen. You already know what's coming. Before you even say hello, they launch into it: complaints, frustration, the same unresolved situation they've described before. You slow your steps, lean against your car, and feel your energy start draining in real time. Nothing dramatic is happening, but something important is being taken from you. Here's the microscript to use when this starts, exactly as written: I want to be here for you, but I can only listen for a few minutes. Then you stop talking and let the silence do its work. This works because it introduces a container. Emotional dumping thrives in open-ended space. When there's no boundary, the other person unconsciously keeps unloading until they feel lighter, regardless of how you feel afterward. By naming a limit early, you change the shape of the conversation without rejecting the person. You're not saying no to them. You're saying yes to yourself. Picture this in a North American setting that's painfully common. A coworker corners you after a meeting and starts venting about a manager. You've heard it all before. You might nod, offer sympathy, and stay longer than you can afford, only to feel irritated for the rest of the afternoon. With this line, you say it calmly, without apology. Most people respond with, "Oh, yeah, sure," and speed up their story. Even if they don't love it, they adjust. The emotional load is capped. Here's the tiny action you can take today. The next time someone starts venting, check the clock and pick a number: 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever is true for you. Say the line, then honor it. When the time is up, you wrap up the conversation politely. This is measurable. Either you did it or you didn't. Now slow this down for a brief practice. Take a breath through your nose and imagine yourself saying the line without tension in your shoulders. Notice any urge to soften it, justify it, or add extra reassurance. Let that urge pass. The power of the boundary is in its simplicity. A common mistake here is waiting too long. You listen past your limit, hoping the person will stop on their own. By the time you try to set a boundary, you're already irritated, and it leaks into your tone. Early boundaries feel kind. Late boundaries feel sharp. This tool is about timing, not toughness. Another version of this shows up with close friends or family. They text you long paragraphs of emotional processing, sometimes late at night. You feel pressure to respond immediately and fully. The correction is simple: I can't get into this right now, but we can talk later. You don't owe a detailed explanation. You're setting a pause, not rejecting connection. Why this works is important. You're teaching people how to access you. When you're always available, always absorbing, people learn that unloading on you is frictionless. When you add a small amount of friction, time limits, pauses, conditions, most people self-regulate. The ones who don't reveal something useful about the dynamic. Here's a brief slow practice moment you can do right now. Imagine the feeling of ending a venting conversation at the time you set. Notice the discomfort and also the relief. Both can exist at the same time. Discomfort doesn't mean you did something wrong. It often means you did something new. This matters later because emotional dumping doesn't always come as a clear request. Sometimes it's disguised as just needing to talk or thinking out loud. If you can introduce limits early and neutrally, you prevent the buildup that leads to resentment, burnout, or withdrawal. You stay connected without becoming the container for other people's unresolved emotions. As we move forward, you'll see what to do when time limits aren't enough, when someone ignores them or leans harder once you try to contain the conversation. That's where the next layer comes in, and where boundaries stop being polite ideas and start becoming durable. You're already tired when the conversation starts. You answer a simple "how are you?" and suddenly you're 10 minutes deep into someone else's crisis. You feel the familiar pull to stay present, to be understanding, to not interrupt. At the same time, there's a quiet irritation building because you didn't actually agree to carry this right now. The mistake most people make in this moment is subtle. You signal availability without realizing it. You nod. You say You ask follow-up questions you don't have the energy to hold. Without meaning to, you invite the unloading to continue. The correction is not to shut the person down. It's to redirect the weight. Here's the script to use when the dumping keeps going. That sounds heavy. What are you hoping I can help with right now? Then you pause. This works because it changes the role you're playing. Emotional dumping assumes you're a container, someone who will absorb, validate, and carry the load indefinitely. This question gently shifts responsibility back to the speaker. It asks them to clarify intent instead of continuing on autopilot. Imagine this in a familiar North American scenario. A friend vents about their relationship for the third time this week, replaying the same details, the same frustrations. You might listen all the way through, offer empathy, and feel drained afterward. With this line, you interrupt the pattern without invalidating their feelings. Some people will realize they don't actually want help, they just want release. Others will ask for something specific. Either way, the emotional spill slows. Why this works is simple. Most people don't mean to dump on you. They're overwhelmed, and once they start talking, they don't notice how much space they're taking. Your question introduces awareness without blame. It narrows the conversation from endless processing to something defined. Here's a tiny action you can take today. Use this question once, even if it feels slightly uncomfortable. Notice what happens next. Does the person get clearer? Do they shorten their explanation? Do they pause? Any of those outcomes mean the boundary worked. Now pause for a brief slow practice. Take one full breath and imagine yourself asking the question with genuine curiosity, not frustration. The tone matters. You're not testing them. You're orienting the conversation. Another common situation looks like this. Someone dumps you, you try to redirect, and they respond with, "I just need to vent." This is where many people cave. The fear is that if you don't listen, you'll seem unsupportive. The correction here is a second script, just as calm. "I hear that. I don't have the capacity to hold a full vent right now." Then you stop. No apology. No long explanation. This works because it separates empathy from availability. You're acknowledging their need without sacrificing your limits. You're not arguing about whether their feelings are valid. You're stating what you can and can't offer at this moment. A key reason this feels hard is guilt. You may have learned early that being a good friend, partner, or colleague means being endlessly available. But availability without consent is not generosity, it's pressure. Boundaries aren't walls. They're agreements. Here's a simple pattern interrupt if guilt spikes. Ask yourself, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? Your energy is finite. Naming the trade-off brings you back into choice. This matters later because emotional dumping often escalates when people sense unlimited access. When you gently redirect or limit early, you prevent the buildup that leads to avoidance or resentment. You don't disappear. You stay present in a way that's sustainable. Notice something important here. None of these responses are dramatic. They don't accuse. They don't lecture. They don't require the other person to agree with you. They only require you to stay aligned with your capacity. As you keep practicing this, you'll start to feel a shift. Conversations become clearer. You're less braced going into them. And when someone does push past your boundary anyway, you'll be ready for the next layer, how to hold the line when redirection doesn't work and the pressure increases. That's where this skill gets tested, and where durability starts to matter. There's a belief that quietly keeps you stuck in these situations. If I hold a boundary when someone is upset, I'm being unkind. Under stress, that belief feels true. You imagine the other person feeling rejected, abandoned, or hurt, and you tell yourself it's easier to just absorb a little more. But this belief collapses under pressure because it trains you to ignore your limits precisely when they matter most. Here's the correction that holds when things don't go smoothly. When you've already redirected, when you've already named capacity, and the other person keeps unloading anyway, you stop managing their emotions and you restate your limit. The line is simple: I can listen for a few more minutes, but I can't keep holding this. Then you pause. The stakes here are real. This is the moment where emotional dumping either becomes a pattern or gets contained. If you keep absorbing after you've named your limit, you teach people that persistence works. If you snap, you damage the relationship. This response does neither. It keeps the boundary intact without adding heat. Picture this in a familiar North American setting. A close friend is going through a rough patch and calls you late at night. You've already listened. You've already offered empathy. You've even redirected once. They circle back again, voice heavy, story looping. Your energy is gone. Old habits push you to stay on the line, to be the reliable one, even as resentment creeps in. Instead, you say the line calmly. Not as a warning. Not as a plea. Just as information. What happens next is important. They may sigh. They may push once more. They may say, I just don't know who else to talk to. This is where the belief gets tested. You feel the pull to rescue. But rescuing here doesn't actually help them, it just trains them to lean harder on you. You hold steady. This works because you're no longer negotiating. You're stating capacity as a fact, the same way you'd state you have to leave for another appointment. Emotional boundaries work best when they're boring. No drama means no leverage. Now slow this moment down. Before you imagine saying the line, check your body. Is your jaw tight? Are your shoulders raised? Let them soften slightly. Take one slow breath out. Your nervous system sets the tone before your words do. A calm body makes a firm boundary feel safe instead of sharp. This applies at work too. A coworker regularly vents to you about leadership, deadlines, and stress. You've tried redirecting. You've tried time limits. One day, they ignore both and launch in again. You say, "I can't take this on right now," and you turn back to your screen or your notes. You don't explain why. You don't stay emotionally engaged. You simply remove yourself as the container. Here's the hard part: there may be no immediate resolution. The other person may feel awkward. They may act distant for a bit. This is where many people undo their own boundary by overcompensating later, checking in excessively, apologizing, or reopening the vent. But boundaries don't need to be smoothed over. They need to be respected. Try a brief slow practice now. Imagine the silence after you restate your limit. Notice the discomfort. Let it exist. Then notice that nothing breaks. The relationship doesn't collapse. The world doesn't end. The discomfort passes, and what remains is clarity. This is durability. It's not about having the perfect phrase. It's about staying aligned when someone else's discomfort tries to pull you out of yourself. You're allowed to care and to stop. You're allowed to be kind and to have limits. There's a vignette coming where all of this shows up at once: care, guilt, pressure, history. The boundary won't be perfect. The situation won't resolve neatly. But you'll see what it looks like to walk away lighter anyway, even while things remain unfinished. That's the standard we're aiming for. You're sitting in your car outside your apartment, engine off, phone still in your hand. The call just ended, but your body hasn't caught up yet. Your chest feels tight, your head feels full, and there's that familiar sense that something has been taken from you, even though you were just being there for someone you care about. The conversation started innocently enough. A friend texted earlier, "Can I call you for a minute?" You said yes without thinking. By the time the call actually happened, you were already tired, but you didn't want to back out. As soon as you answered, the unloading began. Same situation. Same emotions. Same unresolved loop. At first, the old reaction almost wins. You nod along. You offer a few validating sounds. You feel yourself slipping into the role you know too well, the steady one, the listener, the place where everything gets dropped. You notice the clock, but you ignore it. You tell yourself it's not the right time to interrupt. Then you catch it. You remember the first tool. Early, clean containment. You take a breath and say, "I want to be here for you, but I can only listen for a few minutes." Your voice is calm, slower than usual. You don't add anything else. There's a pause on the other end. Not hostile. Just surprised. They speed up a little, condense the story. The emotional weight lightens slightly. You feel a small shift in your body, not relief yet, but less bracing. A few minutes later, the conversation starts to expand again. Details pile up. Emotion rises. This is where, in the past, you would have stayed silent and absorbed it all the way through. Instead, you use the second tool. "That sounds heavy," you say. "What are you hoping I can help with right now?" Another pause. This one is longer. They sigh. "Honestly, I don't even know. I just needed to get it out." That answer matters. It tells you something about what's actually happening. You acknowledge it without taking it on. "I get that," you say. "I don't have the capacity to hold a full vent tonight." Your heart rate picks up slightly as you say it. Guilt flickers. The old urge to soften it, to add reassurance, to promise later, to make it easier for them, almost takes over. You notice it. You don't follow it. They push once. "I just don't know who else to talk to." This is the hardest moment. Care and pressure collide. You feel the familiar pull to rescue, to prove you're reliable, to sacrifice your own capacity to protect the relationship. Instead, you restate your limit, narrower now. "I can listen for a couple more minutes, but then I need to stop." You mean it. Those last few minutes pass. When they're up, you say you need to go. You don't justify it. You don't apologize. You end the call kindly and clearly. Now you're sitting in the quiet of your car. The situation isn't resolved. Your friend is still dealing with the same issue. There's no dramatic breakthrough, no emotional closure. But something inside you feels different. You're not buzzing with resentment. You're not replaying the conversation, wondering what you should have said or why you didn't protect yourself sooner. You feel a little tired, but not drained. The emotional weight didn't transfer fully this time. Here's the slow practice embedded in this moment. Notice that improvement doesn't mean perfection. You still felt guilt. You still felt pressure. The old reaction almost won. But you caught it earlier. You responded instead of defaulting. You stayed aligned with your capacity even while caring. That's the integration. Boundaries aren't one clean sentence that fixes everything. They're a series of small decisions made under mild to moderate stress. Each one keeps you a little more intact. As you drive inside and head up to your place, the situation remains ongoing. You may talk again. You may need to restate limits. But you're no longer carrying the entire emotional load alone. Something is clearer. Something is lighter. And that's enough for now. What you've been doing throughout this lesson is learning how to respond instead of absorb. Absorbing scatters you. It pulls your attention into other people's emotions, problems, and unfinished loops, and leaves you carrying weight that was never yours to hold. Responding brings you back into intention. It lets you stay connected without dissolving into someone else's emotional process. That shift, from automatic availability to conscious engagement, is the core of this work. First, you stepped into the exact moment where emotional dumping begins and learned how to interrupt it early with a simple, kind limit. That stopped the default pattern before it had time to form. Then, you practiced redirecting the conversation when unloading continued, shifting responsibility back to the other person instead of silently carrying it yourself. Next, you learned how to separate empathy from capacity, how to acknowledge someone's feelings without agreeing to hold all of them. Finally, you saw how to restate a boundary under pressure, when guilt, history, and care all try to pull you past your limits. None of these moments required confrontation. They required clarity. What ties all of this together is one principle: your capacity matters as much as your care. When you ignore that, you don't become more supportive, you become depleted. And depletion quietly erodes relationships from the inside. When you honor capacity, you stay present longer, with less resentment, and with more steadiness over time. Now let's turn this into forward motion with 3 things you can do today. First, choose one boundary phrase from this lesson and write it down exactly as it is. Not 3. Not a list. 1. Put it somewhere visible. Read it once before your next interaction where emotional dumping might show up. This isn't about memorizing scripts. It's about reducing friction when the moment arrives so you don't default to overgiving. Second, practice ending one conversation on time today. Set a limit, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever is honest, and honor it. When the time is up, close the conversation kindly and clearly. Notice what happens in your body afterward. Relief, discomfort, guilt, any of it is allowed. What matters is that you followed through. Third, catch the urge to explain and let it pass once. Just once. When you name a limit today, don't justify it. Let the sentence stand on its own. Explanations turn boundaries into negotiations. Clean statements keep them intact. As you continue, the next layer to build is internal: how to recognize the moment before you say yes automatically, before your body commits you to holding more than you can. A logical follow-up lesson would be something like boundaries, how to stop saying yes before you check your capacity, because it works upstream of everything you practiced here. That's where boundaries stop feeling reactive and start feeling intentional. You don't need to stop caring. You don't need to become distant or detached. What you're building is discernment, the ability to choose when and how you engage, instead of being pulled in by default. When you stop being the emotional dumping ground, your relationships don't get colder. They get clearer. And clarity is what makes care sustainable. If you want continued guidance on protecting your energy while staying connected, subscribe and keep going.